So my talk today is called the HODL Guard, and what I'm talking about is physical security in Bitcoin. So some practical tips about how you can protect yourself from the risks of physical attack, etc. If you're someone that holds Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Cool. So this talk was a bit of a last minute one. I got asked to do this about 3 weeks ago. I was speaking at Baltic Honey Badger in a talk there. I spoke on a panel about physical security in Bitcoin, and a few people came up and said they wanted to hear some more specific information on that there. So as much as I'm able to in half an hour, it's a pretty difficult topic to try and cover in half an hour space, but as much as possible I'm going to try and give you guys some specific advice about that particular topic. So just to introduce myself for those of you guys who don't know me, look, I'm currently work as a developer for a crypto exchange in New Zealand, where I'm from. Prior to that, I was working for a program for the government where if you're on welfare, you want to start your own business, I train them about how to write a business plan and get funding to do that. Also play in a very loud metal band, as those of you guys who saw my talk at Baltic Honey Badger might know. But what I'm really drawing on today is that my prior career, I was in the police for 10 years, and the last year and a half of that I was in the personal protection detail for the head of state at home. So that's what I'm going to be trying to draw on to give you guys some specific advice about the situations that you might encounter where physical attacks are going to happen in Bitcoin. So what we're going to cover today, as well as I'm able to, I'm going to try and squeeze this in. Let me know if I'm getting a little close to time towards the end there. What we're going to cover off is an analysis of known physical attacks in Bitcoin, looking at some statistics there and some conclusions that we can draw from that. An examination of situational awareness is the best proactive measure. So if there was one thing I could teach you in a classroom environment that could help you to improve your physical security, that's probably going to be it. And some practical advice for attack deterrence, so looking at some specific scenarios and trying to give you some top tips, if you like, about how you might be able to harden yourself against those attacks. So what do I mean by physical security? By that I'm meaning protecting yourself or others from physical harm, unauthorized access to confidential information, or theft. Cool, so the first thing we're going to look at these history of physical attacks, and what I'm drawing on here is a GitHub repo by Jameson Lopp. It's called Bitcoin Physical Attacks, and it's at that URL that you have there. I'll have the slides of all this up if you guys want to get this information later, so you'll be able to grab that then. So what Jameson has done, with the help of some other people here, is catalogued all the known physical attacks that involve Bitcoin or cryptocurrency there. So it's a good summary of some data that we can draw some conclusions about patterns or other information we might get about what physical attacks in Bitcoin are like to look at. So just some caveats on that data before I start looking at it there. It's a small and unclear data set. So it's in multiple languages that I've had to translate using Google Translate, so some details been lost there. It's all secondhand information. A lot of them are news reports, so there's a lot's probably been lost in translation. Some of them are really lacking detail. They're 4 or 5 lines, so there's not a lot of specific information about the finer detail about how the stuff went down. Another caveat, look, I haven't got the statistics to prove this, but I'd be quite confident saying that electronic theft or loss is a much more realistic scenario than physical theft. So this is still an edge case sort of situation. It's unclear in many of these cases whether the attackers are after a specific cryptocurrency or just crypto in general, which may be important as we go forward. If we see another altcoin bubble or things like that, it may be the fact that you are known to be a holder of Ripple, for example, or whatever it might be that makes you a target, rather than just being known for having crypto in general. So that's unclear here, and it's something that might be a factor going forward. Lastly, my suspicion would be that many more would not have been reported in the news media or to the police or law enforcement. So again, this is not a complete data set, but nonetheless, we're going to have a look at it and see what details we can draw from it. So first off, I've cut this by date and by location, and what we can see very clearly here is that there's a real prominence of the United States as a location for this stuff to happen. So that leads with 12 of the attacks. There's 52 in total that are logged in this repo, but the United States leads quite clearly with 12. Next behind we have the UK, Ukraine, Netherlands with 4 each, Russia and India with 3, Canada, UAE, Norway and Austria with 2, and then all these other ones down the bottom with 1. So it's a relatively even global distribution, but there is quite a prominence or an overemphasis on America in this thing there. So that may be something. Again, how much of this is to do with there being more media bias or more media reporting in America versus other places. I'm not quite clear, but certainly going on the stats here, it's much more likely to happen in America than another country. The other way I've cut this is by year of event. So we can see in 2014 there's 1 recorded attack. In 2015 and 16 we had 4. That more than doubled in 2017 to 11. In 2018 it more than doubled again to 25. And in 2019 so far we only have 7. So hard to draw a correlation about what exactly that is tied to, but my suspicion would obviously be price, or perhaps more specifically attention in the news media. So again, a very rough conclusion that I could draw there would be that it's not so much of a threat now, but when we have another big price bubble and it's in the media all the time, you're likely to see this thing increase quite a bit more. And just going purely off the stats there, you're probably going to see something along the lines of 50 plus happening in a year in a situation like that there. So going forward, I think this is going to become a more significant threat. But again, if you look at those numbers, 52 in 5 years? It's not that large an amount of attacks that are recorded here. So the next one, and probably the most important one, is modus operandi. So that's a fancy police term for saying kind of what exactly happened. And this is always a bit of a murky area, right? Like what constitutes a burglary or a theft, etc., is somewhat up to interpretation. So I have interpreted these in this way myself. I've split these up into 6 different types of scenarios that these have occurred in. And again, this will be on the slides if you want to have a look at this a bit later about how I've classified these here. That might be a little clearer for you to look at. But what the data says is that the 2 leading modus operandi or methods where these attacks take place in is, the first one is in-person trades with 29%. So that what I mean by that is someone has agreed to meet with another person to buy or sell cryptocurrency, usually for cash, and at that trade or surrounding that trade, the attack has happened there. The next most common one is home or work invasion. So someone has been attacked in their home or their workplace by individuals who believe that they had access to their Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies in that space there. So those 2 lead the way at 29% with 15 instances each. The next most common one is kidnapping at 25% with 13 instances. And by kidnapping, I'm meaning someone was abducted, and usually from a public place, and they were threatened or inflicted with violence to induce themselves or other people to transfer cryptocurrency. So that's the 3rd most common methodology that you see there. After that, we've got burglary. There's 3 of those that were a break into a business premises, and they were all to steal a Bitcoin ATM. So not a very common mode of theft or attack, that one. There's 2 swottings. If you're not familiar with what that means, that's someone who, when you call up the police and say, I'm at your target's address and I've got a gun, and an attempt to get the police to come and kick their door down. There's 4 others that I've kind of put in miscellaneous. So one of them was the developer of Skycoin that supposedly had a home invasion. And according to him, it was a home invasion that you put in that top category there, but some things didn't really add up. There's a bit of debate about whether it was just an elaborate scam to run off with people's Sky coins or whatever they were. So I've kind of put that in miscellaneous because to me, I think it's debatable about whether that actually happened. The next one is there was a theft of a large number of ASICs in, I think it was Iceland from memory. Very unclear from the report there about what exactly happened. It seems like it's an insider job, but unclear about whether they broke in or they just walked out with them or whatever. So I've lumped that miscellaneous. There's another one where a lady in Japan was strangled to death by some people that she met at a cryptocurrency seminar, I think. Unclear from there about what exactly went down. They did a post-mortem and found that she'd been strangled, but it was unclear about exactly how this had all gone about, whether they'd met her or they'd been trading Bitcoin before this happened or whatever had gone down. So I've just put that in miscellaneous. And the last one was there is a scammer in India who stole a lot of people's money and they got together and lynched him. Again, it's a bit of an edge case. There's none of you guys, I hope, there, so I've just kind of put that in miscellaneous category as well. So they are the scenarios that are most likely or in rank of likelihood that you are likely to encounter a physical attack for Bitcoin, looking at these stats. So what conclusions can we draw from this? So trading a Bitcoin in person for cash can be a risky business and you should take precautions. So obviously I don't have the statistics about how many cash trades for Bitcoin have ever happened or do happen, so I can't say how risky, but obviously it features very commonly or prominently in these reports here. So if that's something you're doing, make sure you're taking precautions, and as long as we've got time, I'll get to some specific examples of what some of those precautions might be. There's obviously a very clear belief in the criminal fraternity that going after people that have Bitcoin or their immediate circle and threaten them with violence is a way to get their crypto. So, for example, burglary, breaking into someone's house and taking their stuff, is a much lower risk of getting caught and a much higher rate of success doing that there. The fact that this features that highly in that space means there's an awareness or a belief, true or false, that it's much easier for me to hold a gun to your head and demand you transfer me your Bitcoin than trying to break into your house when you're not there and steal your private keys or your seeds or whatever it might be. There's an alarming trend of impersonating or actually being authority figures in these reports here. It features it's unusually common in here. So people either dressing up as police officers or pretend to be them as a way to gain access or get contact with people, or in some countries actually the police going and stealing your cryptocurrency or whatever it might be. Obviously if you're in a third world or less developed nation, it may be, it's kind of par for the course there, as I believe, with dealing with the authorities. But if you think about what happened with Silk Road with Sean Bridges and Carl Force there, stealing a large amount of Bitcoins, I think it's something that may become a more prominent feature or more prominent threat going forward as the value of Bitcoin increases. So be careful about what you say to law enforcement about your dealings with cryptocurrency. And if anyone is dealing with you in that context, claiming to be a law enforcement officer, make sure you're very clear that you have verified their identity. So the next one is there's a read between the lines here, trust in my gut. There's a very clear message here that having a bit too high of a profile, so either being loud about being involved in this space or bragging about how much Bitcoin or cryptocurrency you have is at the root of a lot of these happening, or having kind of a poor choice of associates, right? So hanging out with the wrong crowd. So that's important in that from that we can really deduce that it wasn't necessarily the fact that these people had Bitcoin or crypto that made them a target. It was just, it could have been money or it could have been any other sort of thing they had. They just were hanging out with the wrong crowd, if you like. The last one is that home or work invasion is growing, and it features very highly in this data set. And in my opinion, I think that's a significant threat for Bitcoin businesses going forward. So if you think about the world today, if you want to go and get your hands on $1 million or $500,000 worth of liquid assets, it's more or less impossible, right? Years ago, you used to be able to rob a bank and you could kind of get away with that. Now, as we all know, that's a very hard thing to pull off, and they've got a lot of measures in place to make that very hard to get your hand on that amount of liquid assets. I'll guarantee you that if I had a team of 3 trained people, there would be a very large number of Bitcoin businesses out there in the world that I could get in there and out with that amount of Bitcoin in my wallet in under 10 minutes, guarantee you. So if you are someone that operates a Bitcoin business and you have access to a large amount of funds, and you may have multi-sig, you may have other things in place, but if someone had a gun to the head of one of your employees and you would transfer the cryptocurrency, I would suggest that you need to think about some physical hardening measures for your business. By that I mean, look, I've been to quite a few Bitcoin businesses before, and they have good, robust office security, like swipe cards and so forth. But I'm talking about if someone came to your front door with a sledgehammer, how quickly could they get into your office? And so maybe think about it more like a liquor store than an office building might be a smart approach for some of these businesses. So how are we going for time? Yep, sweet. So situational awareness is what I'm going to move on to here. And look, again, this is a really hard thing to teach in this environment, right? It's something you've got to kind of learn about being street savvy or physically defending yourself. But if there's one thing I could teach in this environment, situational awareness would be the topic. So what situational awareness is just kind of being a bit more aware, a bit more savvy about what's going on around you and responding to changes in your environment. So a system that they use in the police to teach us is this thing called Cooper's Colors, right? And what this is splitting up the state that you are mentally in during any part of the day into these 5 states here. So the first one is white, and that's unprepared and unready to take action. So you're off in daydream land, you're on your phone or whatever, you're not aware of what's going on around you. The next one is yellow, and that's being prepared and alert and relaxed. So what most of us would consider to be kind of our normal state. We know what's happening around us, but we're not particularly focused on anything. Next one is orange, and that's alert to a probable danger. So you see a threat and you're focused on it, you're paying attention, and you're focusing on that specific thing to the detriment of others. Last one is red, and that's action mode. So something really goes wrong, you're focused on dealing with that particular event, you're in the moment, if you like, dealing with that particular situation. And the last one is black, and that's panic or breakdown. So this can't be happening, this isn't real, I don't know what to do, and you freeze. That's the final state, okay? So what this is about is being aware that these 5 states exist, and being a bit more conscious and disciplined about your practice, about which one you are in, and what is the appropriate one to be in the space that you're in the moment. So I'll skip through this to keep it going. A good example of this that we could probably all relate to is when we're driving down the street, right? So white might be you're at the traffic lights and you're on your phone and you hear a beep from the car behind you and you look up and go, oh, the light's gone green, and you drive off, right? That would be the white state. Yellow would be what most of us, the state that most of us are in when we're driving along the street, right? So we're kind of tuned in, but we're also kind of tuning in and out, but we're aware of what's happening around us as we're proceeding along. Orange would be maybe you're coming up to a school or a treacherous piece of road, so you're focusing a bit more, you're not listening to the radio or anything like that, you're tuning in on the moment and what's in front of you. Red would be a situation where, you know, a kid runs out in front of the car, or you swerve or something like that there, and you're really intently focused on dealing with that threat in the moment. And black would be if you were off in daydream land and you look up and, oh, gee, I'm about to go off a cliff, and you just freeze, panic with your foot on the brake or something like that there. So that's kind of, I hope that makes it a little bit easy to understand about what these kind of 5 states look like. So all of these have their place, right? You know, you need the black or the whites to be able to just tune out and relax, go to sleep, you know, let your brain percolate. And if you're in the orange and red zone at all times, your brain is not equipped to do that, right? You'll just burn out, you'll mentally be drained. But that's also what causes paranoia, hyper focus on threats and things like that. They're seeing demons everywhere that they're not. So being aware of these 5 things is something you've got to learn and you've got to practice. But breaking up your daily attention into, rather than just being on or off, into a bit more of a granular awareness of these 5 states is a practice that you want to try and develop every day. And also something that you learn in law enforcement, they try and teach you is, you know, as you're walking down the street, imagine, okay, so if there was a threat now, where would it come from? What are the hazards at the moment? Which is just the same as defensive driving that I'm sure a lot of you guys have done. So that's something that you can practice to just get yourself a little bit more aware and disciplined about controlling the mental state that you're in. So when you're in orange, when you're in that threat zone, just a couple of practical tips. First off, be aware of any exits. So that's the first thing you want to be aware of is how do I get out of here if this thing goes wrong? They've got this acronym, you know, we love acronyms in the police and the army. This acronym here, they use SEE, suspects exist everywhere. So as a way to kind of engage your brain and get you thinking about these things, think about, so who out of the crowd here would be a likely target? Where, you know, where would they be going if they had a weapon? Where would it be? Things like that there. So start getting your brain chewing on these sort of things. Another way is if X, then Y. So if that guy over there came running at me now, where would I go? What would my first action be? Would I pick up my chair and throw at him? Would I run to that door there or whatever? And a lot of this, what this is doing is, you're never going to be able to see the threat coming or pick it, but it's just getting the brain engaged and doing your kind of mental homework, if you like, so that when that threat happens, you've already got a plan and you're responding actively, rather than your brain being in shock and, oh, gee, something's happening, and then you've got to think about what you do, and then you do it, which can lose you some really critical seconds when something really bad goes wrong. And the last one, pretty important one here, keep personal effects, and again, one of these lovely acronyms that we love again, NEAR, never exceeding arm's reach is what that means. You know, lovely convoluted military term, that one there. But when you're in a situation like that, make sure all your personal effects are within your arm's reach, right? When you're in the army and you get issued your firearm, they train you, and you know, if they catch you not doing this, you've got to do lots of press-ups and things like that. But your firearm is never out of your arm's reach, right? So you sleep with it, you go to the toilet with it, shower with it, and that sort of thing there. So if you're in a high-threat environment, think about your bag, your computer, your phone, all that thing in that sort of way. I have seen some people doing some pretty shocking instances of leaving things unattended in certain places. So that's something that, you know, be a bit more aware of what's going on around you, and make sure that you're keeping those things within arm's reach. So in summary, look, shifting gears from 1 to 5 takes mental time and energy. As I said, you'll lose critical seconds when something goes wrong if you're going from daydream land to you know, hyper-awareness responding to a threat. So what this is about is getting yourself into gear 3 before you need to shift to gear 5. So your default state should be that relaxed awareness in the moment and zen. which might seem normal, but what is the reality in most of the world, the world today, if you look around, is people are more likely in that white state, right? They're distracted, they're on their phone, they're walking down the street and they've got no idea what's going on around them. And the world that we live in today really promotes that distractedness. And there's a lot of phones and lights and buzzers and things trying to distract your attention from what's going on around you. So practice a bit more, be a bit more intelligent about situations where perhaps you need to put that phone down and focus on what's going on around you in the space that you're in, realizing that this perhaps is a bit of a high threat zone, and look, I can look at that later, but I should really be paying a bit more attention to what's going on around me than what's happening right now. So great analogy there, or analogy that I've got there is, look, you wouldn't drive through a school on your phone. It's the same thing here, right? So be aware of the situation you're in, respond accordingly, just like you would when you're driving. All right, some specific situational guidance about dealing with these things here. Let me just get a water, actually, before I die. So in law enforcement, they've got this acronym called CRAVED, and that's for why things are stolen, and it's a way to assess what things are more likely to be taken than others. So what CRAVED stands for is these things here. So the first one is C, which is concealable. So if something is easy to be hidden, then it is more likely to be stolen. Removable, so something like a car that's obviously easy to take away, or something small like a stereo or something like that, it's easy to be removed, then again it's something that's more likely to be stolen. If it's available, so easy to get access to, not secured behind a safe or a gate or something like that, then again that increases the likelihood that it's likely to be stolen. If it's valuable, so high-ticket items are more likely to be stolen than low-ticket items. Enjoyable, so something that's enjoyable in and of itself. So here I'm talking about alcohol, PlayStations, things like that that are inherently enjoyable items. And the last one is disposable, so things that are easy to palm off and sell, right? So what CRAVED is it's a way of looking at any particular item and seeing how its likelihood to be stolen, right? And this is why if you look at a theft report, you're much more likely to see consumer electronics or cash than perhaps a fridge or a bed or something like that, right? Because those things are more craved than these other ones are. So if you look at Bitcoin, it's obviously very concealable, it's very removable and available. Those two are somewhat debatable depending on your security model. Obviously it's valuable. I wouldn't necessarily say it's inherently enjoyable unless you're one of these mad stat sacker sort of people that sits at home with your little Bitcoin hoard and whatever. And obviously it's quite disposable, right? Easy to sell, right? So it is a very high risk of theft item. And the two of those things that you really have the most control over are its removability and its availability. So any security measures you're taking about Bitcoin, if you want some framing about what you should be doing, think about removability and availability. So how easy it is to get and take away, and how easy it is to get access to are the two areas where you can look at improving its, changing the dynamic a little. So blast through these tips as quick as I can. So the first one is home security, and again, look, these are all just some things off the top of my head. It depends on your particular situation. There's lots of caveats and counterpoints to all these, but here's just a couple of tips I want to try and give you on some common situations here. So for your home security, think about it as less desirable versus invulnerable, all right? There is no way you can make your house impossible to break into, even if you've got a castle or a fortress. There's always a way to get in there, right? So don't think about invulnerability, don't think about making it impossible, just think about making it less desirable, right? You want to be the hardest house to break into in your street is all you need, right? Not impossible, just harder than the next house. So some really easy wins if you want to improve your physical security. Here's some really easy things that you could do that are going to up the grade quite significantly. So adequate lighting is probably the easiest one. Increasing your visibility from road or neighbors, so making sure that you've got a clear line of sight onto your property from the street or from people around you. Window bolts and alarm systems are probably the two security measures that I would suggest are the best kind of costs versus ease trade-off that you can make, right? So the most common way that someone will break into your house is using a screwdriver to jimmy through a window, typically an aluminium window. So putting those window bolts on the window there is about the best security measure in a lot of residential houses that you can take to make it a little bit harder. And obviously an alarm system, I don't really need to explain why that's really good. If you talk to burglars, those two things are probably the biggest things that will dissuade them from breaking into your house. The next one is to layer security. This means, have multiple layers of security that someone has to pass through to get access to your stuff. So this means like a gate at the front of your house, and then a lock on your front door, and then a lock on the room, and then a safe inside. So you just want to add multiple layers that they have to hop through, which is going to make it exponentially more difficult to get access to your stuff. So the next one, blend in and be the grey house. So think about what makes your house stick out on the street and makes it like a property that people pay attention to. If you talk to burglars, they will quite often case down the street and they'll look for ones that, oh, that place looks interesting. And so you want to be the place that just blends in with everywhere as much as possible. So make it as boring on the outside as you possibly can. Probably the most effective burglar deterrent is a dog. If you talk to any burglars, that's almost certainly a no, unless there's a really, really good reason to go into the house. So a little high maintenance having a dog, but if you want one step that you can take, that's probably the best one, is to get a dog. Develop a rapport with your neighbours, so make sure that they're aware of when you're coming and going, what you're doing, and they've got an eye on your property. They are your eyes and ears when you're not there, so that's another really good tip that you can take as well. As a sweeping generalisation, apartments are safer than residential addresses just because there's more access control getting in there, and there tends to be more security measures. So if you're trying to make a decision between one or the other, an apartment is generally better. If you do have an apartment, make sure that you invest in more secure door locks. Make sure you lock your windows in the balcony. Very common break-in method there is someone to break into one house or get access to one thing and then climb down their balcony into one below, and people very often leave their balcony doors or windows open, so make sure you do that. Be proactive about tailgaters, so people that don't swipe the swipe card behind you and come into the place, make sure you challenge them, because that's a very common way to get into a house. So home invasion, this is a bit of an extreme one to give some examples on, but I wanted to try and talk to it to some degree. Look, this again is very dependent on your situation and your jurisdiction. So for businesses, I highly suggest that you should look at physical hardening for the place that you're in. That may be physical bars on your windows. There may be some other measures that you can take. Again, it's a very deep, sort of complex topic, but do think about, it's all very good and well having swipe cards and that sort of stuff there, but if I'm going to come with a sledgehammer, how quickly am I going to be in there and into your office with a gun to your head? That's what you really want to think about with this one here. For both businesses and residential addresses, you want to have a safe room, and that's nothing too crazy. All that means is have an identified space that you can retreat to if someone breaks into your house, and make sure you have some extra security measures there, like an extra bolt on the door or whatever it might be to keep people out. And with that safe room, make sure that you practice. You have standard operating procedures, and you practice what your panic procedure is, right? So when bad things go wrong, your reptile brain will take over, you'll panic, you'll be off in space or whatever it might be. In the army, the police, they teach you the importance of drilling. Like, you learn all the stuff about when your firearm runs out of ammunition or you have a stoppage. You practice that over and 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 over, time and time again. And the idea is that when your brain shuts down and you're in panic mode, your body responds instinctively and automatically. So you want to try and develop that as much as possible. So if someone breaks into your house, what are the steps that you are going to take, and what is the plan that you have? Obviously, strong doors and a peephole. If you look at Jameson Lopp's attacks there, most of these guys came to the front door and there was some sort of conversation before they forced their way in. So having a strong door that can resist that and a peephole that you can communicate through is a really good methodology to employ here. Lastly, firearms. This obviously depends where you live, what the rules and laws are. Some people are more comfortable with this than others. All I will say about that is if you're standing from the position of an illegal position, it's probably the most defensible situation you can imagine is you shooting someone who has come into your house where you have retreated to get away from them, right? There's nowhere else you can go. If you're feared for your life, it's pretty justifiable that if you need to take that step that you did. So again, I'll leave that one up to you, but it is something to consider in a situation like this, because when someone breaks into your house, like, where else are you going to go? It might come down to that. Next one's traveling. So either going to conferences or things like that, there's a couple of tips. Traveling groups would be my advice wherever possible. Be careful about what you advertise visually and audibly. People are very big fans of these big HODL Bitcoin logo shirts, which I think you've got to be a little bit more subtle than that. But be careful about how loudly you're saying Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Ethereum, or whatever at a bar or things like that there. I haven't seen any evidence of this yet, but I guarantee you that in the future there will be teams of people who are aware of what is happening in this space here, that know what you guys look like, or some of you look like, that are out there trying to find where you're at and if they overhear this sort of stuff there, you're going to end up finding yourself inadvertently being a target. Lock everything. So lock your bag, even your bag when you leave it in the hotel room or anything like that. Even if it's a cable tie, that extra 10 seconds that they've got to be worried about getting caught or whatever it might be is an effective deterrent. Be aware of what you leave lying around in open view. So in your hotel room, if you're like me, you like to explore all your crap out on the floor and things like that there. But do be aware about what is lying in easy view that a maid could get in and out in 2 minutes and see some confidential information there. So again, even locked with a cable tie inside a bag is an effective deterrent for things like that there. I would suggest always using the do not disturb sign and employing a rubber doorstop to make sure that no one is entering your place whenever they do. I mean, there's more secure ways than that, but that's a nice, easy methodology to employ. So bring a rubber doorstop with you, leave the do not disturb sign on, and put that in place when you leave. If you want a hot tip about the best room for security in a hotel, it's on the second floor by the elevator, because you're insulated from people coming into the lobby kind of general area, but also being by the elevator there, you've got a bit of, there's that awareness of people coming and going. Second floor is good because anything above the third floor, etc. Look, if you need to jump out the balcony, which has happened in a couple of these attacks that Jameson Lopes talked about, that may be something you need to do. So the second floor by the elevator is always the best room from a security perspective in a hotel. The last one here, I haven't seen any evidence of this yet, but guarantee you boys and ladies, this will be coming, is what's called the Black Widow attack. So you're at a conference, you're out last night at the thing like we have, and some very beautiful lady comes up to you who takes an unusually strong amount of interest in you. You go back to the hotel room and have a lovely night, and you find out later that while you're asleep in bed, she woke up, stuck a USB stick into your computer, took it back to the mafia guy who was her handler, and all your Bitcoin or things like that are gone. So I would suggest that is going to be a much more present or much more likely attack before you see more physical ones. So it's something to be aware of, and obviously not just gentlemen, obviously for women as well, something to keep your eye out. So do be aware about your romantic engagements on things like this and what the intentions of some of these people might be. So next one's kidnapping. Now, so this is obviously a very, again, very intense sort of topic. I wouldn't say it's one that most of us are going to be victim of, and if you look at the instances in Jameson Lopes attacks, these were usually quite high-profile people or very loud about how much Bitcoin they had. But nonetheless, it's something that a lot of people ask about, so here's some information on it. So I've had a good amount of training about this working with the Prime Minister's detail. So here's a couple of, if I was to give you some information, these would be the best ones. Routine is definitely your worst enemy, right? So when you're driving the Prime Minister around, when you come back to his residential address, for example, you have like 5 or 6 different routes, and some of these are very convoluted and backwards and things like that there. But the idea is that if they know you always come at the same street at roughly the same time, that's where they're going to be waiting with the machine guns or whatever it might be, right? So try to randomize your routine, because if they know where you're going to be at a specific time, then they can plan and prepare. That's what you want to try and avoid. Avoid publicizing your movements too much. I've seen a few kind of big trader guys on Twitter do this quite a bit about we're going to be at this nightclub at this time. Very, very bad idea and very good and easy way to get kidnapped. Involve your family and friends in your plans. So you want to prepare for these sort of things and make sure that your immediate family members or the people that you live with are aware of and in on the procedures that you're taking place to prevent yourself things from here. Triangulation is an angle here, so they may be getting at your mum or whatever it may be to get at you. So they're equally part of your security considerations as yourself. Think about what the likely ambush points in your schedule and what your standard operation procedures or plan are. So in your daily schedule, if you were going to get bumped, if you were going to get kidnapped, where would those places most likely to be? Where are the dark areas where there's not a lot of public or other members of the public around? Identify what those places are and make sure you've already put in a proactive plan about what is going to happen if it happens in those spaces. Kidnapping is a massive logistical undertaking. It's a very hard thing to pull off, right? And so little countermeasures that you can take, any little thing that you can do, it makes it exponentially more difficult, right? So it's not something that people think it's this really, really big conscious risk. It's a very hard thing to pull off. There's many instances of failed kidnappings. So just little measures that you can take can make this thing much harder than you might believe to pull off. This last thing here, this is an acronym we used to use to help assess your likelihood of kidnap. This is what a attacker needs to succeed in a kidnapping is they need the logistics to pull the thing off. And they need to have done their advanced homework to know where you're going to be and to plan what their plan of attack is going to be. They need distance, so they need to be able to get close enough to you to be able to pull that off. They need to see a weakness and deterrence so that there are not active security measures in place to deter them. They need an escape route to get out, and they need a gap and response to be able to pull this thing off. So again, this can be a methodology where if you're looking to identify where those weak points are or what you can do to proactively protect yourself, LADDER is a really good acronym to use in that space. If you're buying or selling, so if you're buying or selling crypto, and again, this is a common modus operandi for some of these physical attacks, definitely work with a partner, have someone that you go along with that's either there with you or hanging very closely behind that's ready to help out. Scout some suitable public areas and that you're going to conduct your business at and conduct them only there. So I would suggest coffee shops, restaurants, public places like that. But make sure you've already thought about what your plan and your procedures are so that if the guy tries and grabs my treasure, I'm going to do this or that. If someone holds a gun to my head, my steps are this, and etc. And identify all your exits and have your plan in place for those specific areas. Make sure you got some backup tools. I'd suggest a first aid kit, backup phone, maybe a decoy bag or a decoy hardware wallet, whatever it might be, something that you want to bring along. And I would suggest investigating replace by fee or other technical options that you might have as a way to get around these things. My feeling, having read some of these reports, is a lot of these guys aren't very Bitcoin savvy. So you may be able to send them a transaction and have a pre-formatted transaction for those UTXOs already that you broadcast that sends it to an address you can control or something like that there. So that's another angle you might want to explore. So to finish this all off, general tips. This is all about a cost-benefit analysis. You don't need to be perfect, guys. You don't need to be Rambo or James Bond or Jason Bourne or whatever. You just need to be the least fast guy, least slow guy running away from the bear, right? They're trying to get the easy target. Just don't be the lowest hanging fruit. I think a duress or a brick pin on a hardware wallet is probably the most effective countermeasure looking at all these reports I've had before. So definitely make sure that you have a hardware wallet that has these features. And that's the simplest way to avoid this happening. You're probably going to get a beating, but that I think is going to stop the attack or stop them taking your Bitcoin or your crypto if you've got one of those two things in place. So another lovely acronym that we love in the police and the army, the 7 Ps, proper preparation and planning prevents piss poor performance. So what that really means is make sure that you rehearse and you're prepared for all these sort of things when the push comes to shove and the pressure goes on, that you've thought through these scenarios, you've rehearsed and developed a strategy or plan to deal with them. Next one, security culture is everyone's business. So be aware that I might be attacked not to get my Bitcoin, but because I know someone else or I'm a way to triangulate and get access to someone else's funds. So in that sense, you are responsible for the people around you. And try and foster a culture, like I've seen this turn in quite a toxic way in the police and the army, but don't be afraid to call out people when they're being a bit lazy or a bit slack, because they can easily be responsible for you losing funds by their bad practices. Project confidence. Look, I've been in quite a few fights, and I think my takeaway is that the most important thing to winning a fight is not necessarily even skill, it's killer instinct, right? Knowing that you are the aggressor, you are the predator, that you are going to win. Often when people encounter these situations and they've had very little exposure to physical confrontation, they panic, they freeze. There's a million psychological giveaways that creates this kind of snowball effect of making things worse and worse and worse. That's a very hard thing to develop, but if you want some practical tips, I would suggest training in martial arts or firearms is one of the best ways to do that. Getting punched in the face multiple times does give you kind of awareness and gets you comfortable with, it's not that bad once you've had it happen to you a couple of times, but that first time, it's a very scary experience. So in closing, final point is, look, I've seen what happens with the police and the army. We have a culture which is overly focused on paranoia and edge cases about security and what that does to the kind of toxic kind of culture that develops in a situation like that, right? And I think the Bitcoin or general crypto space, if you like, is a very positive one. It's got a very strong community. It's very welcoming. And what is, I think, a very present risk is if the strength that comes from that sort of community goes away because people are too focused on mistrusting people and things around, other people around you there. So, don't let fear or paranoia come to the fore. Look, take proper precautions, but when you let fear and paranoia drive your decisions, then you let the terrorists win. So do keep that, keep it in context. Practice good security, but remember that community and keeping a level head is important for going forward. And that's it, and that's how to reach me. Any questions, if I've got time? Oh. Sorry for the croaky voice, by the way.
Hi. Thank you very much for the pointers. I think that some of them are quite interesting, and I have one question. With regards to protecting your house or your office or, the kind of things that you mentioned, but isn't there a risk of overdoing it and then again you end up in the same situation of attracting attention?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think you're right. Again, the best way I think you can frame it is, like I said, is don't try and be invulnerable. Just try and make it a tank. Just try and make it look at your neighbour and be a little bit better than them. That's the best thing. And that applies to so many things in security culture where people get so overboard about these edge cases that you lose the fun, you lose your agility to be able to respond. So yeah, think about it that way would be my best advice.
So as someone who travels a lot and is fairly smaller compared to most people, although I do have a little bit of martial arts training, it's still of concern for me, like, is that enough? And so I've been looking for, what weapon, I guess, would you recommend that I carry around that, one, doesn't attract attention, but at the same time is actually enough?
First off, when you're talking about weapons, be careful about the situation you put yourself in. So for example, if you carry a knife and you end up stabbing someone, that could get you in a bigger load of trouble than just giving them the money and running off. Probably my advice would be improvised weapons are the best in a situation like that. So something that's not a weapon, but would make a really good club, knife, other sort of thing like that there. I'd tend away from edged weapons, right? So knives and things like that there. Things can get very bad very quickly, especially if you cut the wrong sort of area, but also it's very easy for that knife to get twisted around and start cutting you, right? So I think kind of bludgeons kind of weapons are probably the best ones. But and to be honest, if you're traveling, I would say the most effective thing is like an air horn or something like that, like a really loud, that is not only gets people's attention, but is also like audibly painful for someone, is probably your best defense. Because the other thing as well is a lot of these things you might have some issues in airport security, but something like that, I think you'll be all right. So, yeah.
All right, last question.
The question. What are your thoughts on, CIA started publishing these videos where they talk about how secret agents kind of blend in and avoid surveillance in different areas. What are your thoughts on that? Should people start looking more into it for their own protection? Or when someone's kind of targeting you, it doesn't help that much?
So if you're talking about, like, say, here at a conference, you meaning that sort of thing, or just in your daily life, or?
No, so you're traveling, you work with Bitcoin, you work with crypto, and obviously most of us travel by ourselves. So there are ways to avoid video surveillance, or just to blend in so that, cameras, when they want to target you with surveillance, they will look for a pattern. So they'll look for the person that fits the pattern. If you fit the pattern, like I have a hat, right? They would identify me immediately. But there are techniques in which you can just, start like put a cap on, or just change clothes, or get a backpack instead of like in motion. Would you recommend this to kind of avoid?
So I've worked with a surveillance squad at home, like not in depth, but I've done some co-op work with them, and surveilling someone physically is a very big logistical undertaking. So I would, now we've got security cameras and things like that can make it a lot easier. But as far as people following you, I wouldn't overrate the likelihood of that happening to the average person in this space. But if you're talking about that there, look, the simplest thing you can do is an area where you've got controlled access, right? Like a hotel room, a locked door that's not open to the general public, or just trying to conduct anything in a space like that there. Because if you're talking about someone following you out in the street, there's nothing you can really do, but just trying to make sure that you're aware of the public access to the areas that you're going into, but maybe also having a plan that if I feel like some sketchy guys following me, I have a safe place I can go to if I need to do something where I don't want to feel like I'm being observed.
All right, thanks so much, Rigel. Let's hear it for Rigel.
Thank you.